On the morning of March 2nd, 2026, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps released a statement that did something unusual. It didn't claim a military base had been struck. It didn't announce a missile hit on a power grid or a radar installation. Instead, it named a man, Benjamin Netanyahu. The IRGC's public statement declared that Kheibar Shekan ballistic missiles, the same class Iran has been firing in waves since the war began on February 28th, had targeted Netanyahu's office in a direct surprise strike. The statement named his office, named the headquarters of Israel's Air Force commander, and then added the sentence that set the internet on fire. The fate of the Israel prime minister was at that moment unclear. For a period of hours, maybe longer, depending on which clock you believe, one of the most heavily protected leaders in the Western world went publicly silent. Now, Ray McGovern spent 27 years inside the Central Intelligence Agency. He briefed presidents on Soviet intentions. He sat in rooms where the distance between what is true and what is said publicly could span entire continents. And if you were to ask him what that Iranian IRGC statement actually represents, the targeting of Netanyahu's office, the claim of a surprise strike, the deliberate mention of an unclear fate, he would not give you the answer most people want. He would tell you to stop asking where Netanyahu is and start asking why someone needed you to ask. What you are about to hear is not a mystery about one man's location. That part of the story resolved itself quickly enough. Netanyahu's office issued a denial within hours, calling the IRGC claims fake news. He was photographed visiting the site of an Iranian missile strike on the Israeli city of Bat Yam just days later, standing in the rubble, vowing that Iran would pay a very heavy price. He has since delivered national television addresses describing near total Israeli air dominance over Tehran. He is not hiding. But the story is not actually about where Netanyahu was standing on March 2nd. Ray McGovern used to explain what he called the problem of manufactured silence. When a government, a military, or a media apparatus goes quiet at exactly the moment when the public most needs information, that silence is never neutral. Silence in wartime is a weapon. It is deployed. It has targets. So what you are going to get in this video is the full picture of what happened in those hours and days. What Iran claimed, what Israel said, what independent analysts found, what the information ecosystem looked like, and what a former CIA officer of McGovern's generation would make of all of it. Because this is a war being fought on two levels simultaneously. One level involves missiles, fighter jets, and ballistic trajectories across 1,000 miles of contested airspace. The other level involves perception narrative and the deliberate sculpting of what people believe is happening. Both levels are real. Both levels are dangerous, and understanding the second one may matter more to you than the first. To understand the Iranian IRGC statement, you have to understand the context in which it was made on February 28th, 2026. The United States and Israel launched what may be the largest coordinated strike operation in the history of the Middle East. Within the first hours, Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic for 35 years, was killed. Dozens of senior Iranian military figures died alongside him. Iran's nuclear sites, missile infrastructure, and command networks were struck across at least 26 of the country's 31 provinces, according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. Iran was not simply at war. Iran was, for the first time in its modern history, genuinely wounded at the top. Its command structure was decapitated in the first hours of fighting. What does a country do when that happens? It does what Ray McGovern understood any intelligence apparatus does when it is losing the physical war. It tries to win the information war instead. The IRGC statement about Netanyahu was released on March 2nd during what Iranian military spokespersons called the 10th wave of missile strikes. The claim was specific Kheibar Shekan ballistic missiles had struck Netanyahu's office and the home of Israel's Air Force commander. The claim was designed to travel. And it did travel within hours. It was circulating on X, Telegram, international wire services, and Arabic language satellite channels. Israel's response was immediate and categorical. Netanyahu's office called it fake news. There were no confirmed reports of any missile impact in the areas the IRGC named. The Times of Israel confirmed that Netanyahu's office appeared structurally intact. Netanyahu himself was photographed in public within days, first at the Bat Yam strike site, then delivering a national address in which he told Israelis that Israel had achieved, in his words, almost complete control over the skies of Tehran. The claim was false. That much is now clear. But Ray McGovern would not stop there. He would ask a different question. What was the claim supposed to accomplish? And for who? Here is something that gets lost in the coverage of missile exchanges and casualty counts. This conflict is arguably the most intensive information warfare environment in modern history. Researchers at the Israeli fact-checking organization Fake Reporter documented an Iranian influence network of over 3,000 Twitter accounts posing as Israeli citizens expressing opposition to the war. Iranian state broadcaster IREB aired missile footage from a completely different conflict on the very first day of fighting. Iran's English language outlet Press TV labeled a photograph of a Pakistani drone as an Israeli drone shot down near Natanz. Ukrainian conflict footage was recycled and labeled as images of Tel Aviv destruction. This is not amateur behavior. This is organized, resourced, and deliberate. The Israeli side is not innocent of the same practice. Israel hacked a popular Muslim prayer app in Iran at the start of the war and used it to send messages urging Iranian soldiers to defect. After bombing Evin Prison, the facility that held many of Iran's political prisoners, Israeli intelligence sent footage of the strike directly to Iranian officials as a psychological warning. Israel attempted to manipulate Khamenei's movements in the months before the war by compromising Tehran's traffic camera network, synthesizing that footage alongside billions of other data points to build its target list. NPR's reporting from Tel Aviv confirmed all of this through a senior Israeli defense official speaking on background. The United States military's very first action in this war was not a missile strike. It was a cyber attack. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Dan Kane stated publicly that coordinated space and cyber operations disrupted Iranian communications and sensor networks before the first conventional weapon was fired, leaving Iran unable to see, coordinate, or respond effectively to the opening strikes. McGovern spent his career watching the gap between what governments say and what they do. He would recognize this immediately for what it is, a war in which the battlefield is not only physical terrain, but cognitive terrain. The question, where is Netanyahu, is not just a question. It is a piece of ammunition fired into the information space with the intended effect of sowing doubt about the legitimacy and continuity of Israeli leadership. It almost worked. For several hours, that question echoed across the globe. Here is what makes this moment larger than one missile claim. The question of Netanyahu's whereabouts did not arise in a vacuum. It arose in an information environment already primed by genuine tensions, not manufactured ones. The Israeli strikes on Iranian oil infrastructure, which began around day 8 of the war, produced what Israeli and American sources described to news outlets as a genuine schism between Washington and Tel Aviv. The Israeli strikes on oil sites were described in reported words of American officials as not necessarily our objective. Trump's defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, publicly stated that while the United States would not relent until Iran was decisively defeated, the American president controlled the throttle. The mass murder, the implication was clear. There were things Israel was doing that the United States had not fully sanctioned. This fracture matters because Iran's information strategy depends on it. The IRGC understands, as any competent intelligence service does, that the most effective disinformation does not invent tensions from nothing. It locates a real crack in an alliance and pries it open. The claim about Netanyahu's office was not aimed international audiences at governments in Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, Ankara, Berlin, and Washington, who were already asking whether Netanyahu was acting within the boundaries of the U.S.-Israeli partnership or beyond them. Ray McGovern would call this operating in the seam. You find the real disagreement, you weaponize it, you force your opponent to spend political capital clarifying what is actually an unresolved question. The ceasefire tensions, the oil strike dispute, the Trump administration statements about wanting a short war while Netanyahu discussed many surprises for the next phase, all of it created a scene. The IRGC tried to drive a truck through it. There is a cost to the information war that rarely gets counted in the casualty. Fact checkers documented the claim about Benjamin Netanyahu's brother, being killed in a fire caused by an Iranian missile. The video circulating online turned out to be footage of a house fire in Galloway, New Jersey, uploaded over 3 weeks before the war began. The claim originated on X on March 9th, spread widely, and was debunked within hours, but not before it had been seen by hundreds of thousands of people. Scott Ritter, the former American weapons inspector who has made several extraordinary claims during this conflict, asserted on a broadcast that Netanyahu's brother had been killed and that Israel's national security minister Itamar Ben-Gvir had been seriously wounded in an Iranian strike on his residence. None of these claims have been confirmed by any credible source. Ben-Gvir appeared publicly following what Israeli media described as a car accident. The circumstances remain murky. What is not murky is that unverified claims by named individuals with past credibility can travel faster and further than fact-check correction. This is the cost McGovern would name clearly in an information environment this polluted. Even people trying to find truth will consume some of the poison. There is no clean air. The question is only how much discernment you bring with you when you start breathing it. Iran's internet blackout, which began during domestic protests in January 2026 and continued into the war, created conditions where credible reporting from inside Iran is extraordinarily difficult. When you cannot verify what is happening on the ground, You are operating in the dark, and in the dark, every claim carries equal weight until someone bothers to check, which at the speed of modern social media is rarely before the damage is done. So, where does this leave us? Netanyahu is alive, publicly active, and by his own account, residing over an Israeli military campaign that has struck more than 200 locations inside Tehran, destroy more than half of Iran's ballistic missile launchers, according to Israeli military claims, and achieved what he calls near total dominance of Iranian airspace. Iran, for its part, fired over 500 ballistic missiles and nearly 2,000 drones in the first week of the war, according to a military source cited by Fars news agency. Roughly 60% of those were aimed at American targets across the region. Iran struck a U.S. embassy compound in Kuwait. It struck the U.S. embassy in Baghdad's green zone for the first time in years. It hit civilian apartment buildings in Bat Yam, Tel Aviv, and Beit Shemesh. It sent drones toward Dubai International Airport while passengers sheltered in train tunnels. Iran is losing the physical war. Its supreme leader is dead. Its nuclear infrastructure is degraded. Its regional proxies are weakened. The new supreme leader, Mustafa Khamenei, the dead leader's son, was elected on March 8th, just 8 days into the war. The speed of that succession tells you something about how precarious the system felt in those early days. A country that is losing the physical war does not simply stop fighting, it shifts terrain. It fights the war it can win, or at least the war it can win, or at least the war it can survive. The question, where is Netanyahu, is that war. It is designed to make the world ask whether Israeli leadership has been struck, legitimized, or rattled, whether Israeli government is stable enough to negotiate with, whether the coalition holding this campaign together has a center that can hold. Ray McGovern spent the last years of his public career warning about what he called the politicization of intelligence, the tendency of governments and state aligned media to present desired narratives rather than verifiable facts. He saw it in the lead up to the Iraq War. He documented it with patience and consistency. He would recognize the IRGC's March 2nd statement, not as intelligence, not as battlefield reporting, but as a product manufactured, distributed, and designed for a specific emotional effect in a specific audience. The effect was temporary. The lesson is permanent. There is an old principle that McGovern cited, often drawn from his decades reading intelligence assessments. The absence of confirmation is not the same as absence. When Iran said Netanyahu's fate was unclear, it was not reporting what it knew. It was reporting what it wanted others to believe it might know. The difference between those two things is the entire foundation of modern information warfare. What this war has exposed in a way that earlier conflicts did not fully capture is that we are all now downstream from the information battlefield. Every person watching satellite news, scrolling through X, or reading wire service dispatches during this conflict is operating in an environment where state actors, non-state actors, AI-generated content networks, and opportunistic fabricators are all competing for the same RIA. Stayed inside your head, the 12-day war in June 2025 saw AI-generated videos of supposed Iranian military victories reach tens of millions of views before being debunked. In this current conflict, X announced a 90-day suspension of revenue sharing for creators hosting undisclosed AI-generated war content, an acknowledgement that the problem had already escaped control. Google's own AI video generation tools were reportedly being used in active information operations within days of the war beginning. McGovern would say this: the antidote is not cynicism. Cynicism is not critical thinking. Cynicism just means you disbelieve everything equally, which leaves you just as lost as the person who believed everything. The antidote is discipline. Ask who made this claim. Ask what they gained from your believing it. Ask whether the claim was confirmed by anyone with independent access to the facts. And then wait, not forever, but long enough for the fog to thin. The question, where is Netanyahu, was answered within days. He was in Bat Yam. He was on national television. He was making promises about what Israel would do next. The more important question, the one that does not resolve easily, is what kind of world we are building when the opening moves of a major war include fabricated claims about a head of government's survival, and millions of people take those claims seriously for hours or days before the correction lands. That question does not have an easy answer. But Ray McGovern spent his career insisting it had to be asked. If this video gave you a clear picture of how the information side of this war is actually operating, consider sharing it with someone who is trying to make sense of what they are seeing in the news. Leave a comment below with one question. What do you think is the most dangerous piece of disinformation circulating right now about this conflict? And why do you believe it is spreading? And if you want more analysis like this, grounded, patient, and willing to go deeper than the headline, subscribe. There's a lot more to cover. This channel is not affiliated with Ray McGovern or any of his official representatives. The content you just watched is informational in nature, inspired by the publicly available teachings, writings, and interviews of Ray McGovern. It does not constitute professional advice. Before making any major decision based on the events described in this video, please conduct your own research and consult qualified professionals.